finance management. I would like to welcome you to yet another webinar this morning that the Institute of Economic Affairs will be holding. This is indeed the 28th webinar this year. And so we are glad and to invite you and thank you for logging in. So today's so actually, before I get into the subject matter of today's webinar, I would like to mention that the Institute of Economic Affairs is a think tank. We are a research organization whose mission is basically to promote debate and dialogue on public policy issue, and we do this through evidence-driven policy work in 5 thematic areas. We have the area on public finance management, and obviously IEA is known for its budget work. So one of the flagship activities, the public finance management program, is budget advocacy work. Then we also have a program on that is called trade and development. And of course, we do quite a bit of work related to aspects of regional integration, WTOs, AGOA, and the like, in terms of just helping break those issues down and enhancing citizen engagement around those issues. We have a program that is also more private sector focused or microeconomic focused, if you like, on regulation and competition. That basically looks at issues of enhancing competition and regulation in the different industries. Then the 4th program is what we call futures of foresight, and basically futures and foresight basically tries to enhance the utilization of different methodologies for planning processes that would inform policy, for instance, scenarios building, strategic planning, and the like. And that program basically looks at one of the main objectives of the program is basically to track the implementation of the Constitution. In addition to basically doing quite a bit of work around review and analysis of different of legislations that are actually important to the economy, but also looking at work around or tracking the work that the different independent institutions are doing. But we also have a program on that is called the Special Projects Program. So for some of the activities that are not completely aligned to any of the 5 thematic areas, those are actually implemented by this project on that we call the Special Projects Program. And so this is actually the project that is will be spearheading the discussion for this webinar today. So the webinar, the title is basically Fallacies, Redistributing Income. So the fallacy of whether redistributing income would end poverty. So just as a way of introduction, as Kenyans we are aware of, is in this era of fake news is the aspect of the need to fact check. But the aspect of economic fallacies is something that I believe that Kenyans, of course, I don't have any evidence, but I believe that, and we don't hear much discussion around it, that Kenyans have not interacted with. But all the same, we, from time to time, hear things that are being discussed in the media or reports, media articles and the like, stating certain issues or making certain claims. So that is quite common. So as much as we may, some people may not attribute those to call those issues as fallacies and the like. These are things whether in the public arena, in the media, and the like. And so today we'll be discussing one of those fallacies, and of course breaking it down in terms of first trying to share basically explaining what fallacies are, and I will not preempt that. So I will allow my two colleagues, Maureen and Anna Grace, who will be speaking more into this aspect of whether redistributing income would end poverty. And so they will do this in two parts. So the first part will speak to the aspect of providing an empirical breakdown of poverty. And then the second part is on direct redistribution of income. Basically, the idea of this discussion will be to answer to whether this is indeed a fact or not. And so both Maureen and Anna will basically break this down for us. And I think by the end of the day, we'll be able to make a judgment of whether this is indeed a fallacy or will please to speak during a plenary. Not sure what happened. Hello, am I still audible?
Yes, John, we can hear you. Just go ahead.
Sorry, I think I dropped off there. But without further ado, and just to mention again, the other motivation for this is that the IEA has done some work around we have some 52 fallacies, and this the objective of these webinars and other webinars that will be coming will be to build up on the launch of that book. And so without further ado, I would like to welcome Maureen, who will start us off. Maureen?
Good morning, everyone. My name is from the IEA, and I'll be taking you through the first part of the presentation. Today is treating the fallacy, redistributing income will end poverty. This is a common statement that's been said all over, maybe with no, that's a normative argument meant for good enough, but we are trying to look whether it will work or not. So like John has mentioned, we are doing 52 economic fallacies, and this is one of them. And our first part is explaining what an economic fallacy is. And an economic fallacy is a statement that's believed to be true but is factually, empirically, or theoretically incorrect. And yeah, we are trying to find out whether redistributing income will end poverty is a factually, empirically, or theoretically correct statement. Yeah, that's what we are working on today. And the claim redistributing income will end poverty. We are looking at direct redistribution of income as a way of ending poverty in Kenya, and we are trying to assume that all Kenyans will receive the same income at the end of it all, regardless of your qualification, your age, or your experience. And we have several measurements of poverty that we'll be focusing on. We have the food poverty, we have the overall poverty and the extreme poverty, but our main focus will be on the overall poverty. The food poverty, that's a amount of poverty where the household and the individuals monthly adult equivalent food consumption expenditure per person is below a certain threshold, like in the 2015 data for the Kenya household data, we found that in the rural and peri-urban areas, it was a threshold of 1,954 shillings for the rural and peri-urban areas, and for the co-urban areas, it was at 2,551 shillings in the co-urban areas. And the overall poverty is a measurement of poverty where the households and individuals whose monthly adult equivalent total consumption per person is less than 3,252 in the rural and peri-urban areas and less than 5,995 shillings in the co-urban areas. And anyone who's below that threshold is considered to be overall poor or live in overall poverty. And for the hardcore or extreme poverty, that's when the household, that's a measurement of poverty that describes households and individuals whose monthly adults equivalent total consumption expenditure per person is less than in rural and peri-urban areas, than 1 shillings in the co-urban areas. And yeah, for our arguments, we'll focus on the overall poverty. And why are we focusing on the overall poverty? Because the overall poverty is more comprehensive and it's data that is most readily available, observable to the public, and it's easy to extract. Moving forward, we'll be looking at the overall poverty line, like I've given an explanation, a breakdown. It's computed by looking at the cost of a food basket offering, the minimum nutritional requirement, that is 2,550 kilocalories per adult per day, and the minimum allowance for basic non-food needs, that is shelter, clothing, and personal care. That's at the most basic level, like just what you need, not what you would want. Okay, so we'll be looking at the rural and peri-urban overall poor, like have described in the threshold for the overall poverty. Okay, those who are below the monthly expenditure of 3,252 shillings, they are considered to be living in overall poverty. They are overall poor, and in the co-urban area, for you to be considered to be overall poor, you have to be below the threshold of 5,995 shillings monthly expenditure. On the next slide, we'll be Kenya's poor population. At the national level, rural areas, peri-urban areas, and the co-urban areas, and we'll be focusing on the overall poverty headcount rate and the overall poor population. The overall poverty headcount rate is the proportion, is the share of the total poor population in those areas. Like at the national level, out of the 47 million people, 16,401,000 people are considered to be overall poor, and that is 36.1%. The headcount rate is at 36.1%. In the rural area, it's 40.1%, that is 11,687,000 people are poor in rural areas. And in the peri-urban areas, it's at 27.5%. The overall poverty headcount rate is at 27.5%, and that is 920,000 people. People of the peri-urban areas, they are considered to be below the threshold that's considered to be overall poor. And in the core urban areas, 29.4% are considered to be overall poor. That's 3,795,000 people. Looking at both the population of the peri-urban areas and the core urban areas, you can see if we add both, they are less than the population of the poor in the rural areas, and the rural areas seem to be having like the most of the poor population at 40.1% overall poverty headcount rates. Then moving forward, we're looking at table 2, where we are dealing with direct income redistribution per capita. Like I described before, we're looking at if everyone will earn the same income under the same condition, with the thresholds in both the rural, peri-urban and urban areas, and whatever goods they are buying, the expenditure is at the market price in those areas. We computed it using the total gross national disposable income at 10.083 trillion, with a population of 47,564,296. And from this, we found that if we distributed this gross national disposable income of 10.083 trillion across a population of 47,564,296, the annual income per person, every person will get will be 211,985. Then breaking it down further to the monthly income, we found out that everyone will be getting at least 17,665 shillings and a daily income of at least 589 shillings all across the population. And we are trying to find out whether this will make sense if we consider redistributing the income to make sure maybe everyone gets an annual income or a monthly income or a daily income of these amounts. And this is the 2019 data. My colleague Anna will take you through the next slide. Thank you.
Hello. I will take you through the next part of this presentation, which is to find out whether it actually makes sense to directly redistribute incomes. So up until this point, we know who's considered poor. We know why they're poor, because they fall below a certain threshold. And here we're talking about overall poverty. In urban areas, it's about 6,000 shillings. In rural and peri-urban areas, it's about 3,000 shillings. So now we've taken the scenario where we are redistributing the total gross national disposable income among all 47 million Kenyans. So irrespective of your age, your gender, your occupation, you get 17,000 Kenya shillings at the end of every month. So this is in the event of direct redistribution of income. Now, to find out if that's sufficient or not, let's look at how much people spend on specific needs within the household. So this is data from KNBS based on the Statistical Abstract of 2019 and the Kenya Integrated Household Budget Survey report of 2015-2016. And it shows that on average in Kenyan households, 45% of the income goes towards food and beverages. The next big proportion is other services, but before we get there, let's look at clothing and footwear. 3% of your household income goes towards that. Housing, which is your rent, maybe servicing your mortgage, all that is 6%. And all other goods is 12%. All other services is 34% of your total household income. Now, here when we say all other goods, it's goods outside food and beverages, and clothing and footwear and housing. So other goods would be something like what? Your monthly shopping that's not food and beverages and clothing. Other services are like your internet subscription, probably your fuel, your transportation costs, your healthcare, the cost of, say, maybe buying medicine or consultation fees, your insurance, and this is all summed up to about 34% of household expenditure. So now we look at that in comparison with the 17,000 that each and every one of us would probably be receiving if we consider a direct redistribution of income. So that's on the next slide, which is table 3. And here, the first column is basically an extrapolation from the previous pie chart we've just had, the split of household expenditure, food, clothing, housing, and then goods and services. And at the very top, it's the income per capita, which we are taking to be 17,665 Kenya shillings. So if you look at food and beverages, that's 44.8% of your total expenditure in the household, which would be 7,914 shillings. Yes, I know we said that the food poverty line is about 1,900 in rural Kenya, and in Kenya, in urban areas in Kenya, it's 2,500 shillings. And you're thinking, if we're considering 7,000, that's well above the poverty line. But remember that the poverty line is set at the very bare minimum. Like it's what you need to barely survive. And that's what they set at 2,500 and 1,900 for urban areas and rural areas respectively. But you see there, it's just the cost of, say, if probably looking at the data would give you a better picture of how they calculate the poverty lines. But say if it's expected for you to use 100 grams of maize meal flour, that would help you achieve the 2,550 kilocalories per day, then within that poverty line, the 2,550 food poverty line, it's just accounted for the cost of that unga. You see, it's not accounted for the cost of your gas, the cost of your cooking dishes, any other ingredients that you'd be needing to maybe supplement this meal. And so to say that you just need 2,500 shillings in Nairobi to survive for food, it's a very, I do not want to say unrealistic, but it's hardly sustainable. Looking at clothing and footwear, 2.5% of your total expenditure in a month would be about 500 Kenya shillings. Looking at household needs for clothes and shoes and footwear, this ranges from just your average, probably lounging clothes, to school uniform, which could be very, very dear. And 500 Kenya shillings, which is the rounding off of 442, you can tell me it would not be enough to sustain a whole household, which the average size of a household is 4 people. So you can imagine 4 times 400, you're spending 1,600 a month on clothes, and probably that's the price of a school sweater. Housing is estimated at about 6.4% of your total household expenditure. 1,131 shillings would be your rent in a month, in the event we redistribute income and give you 17,000 shillings every month. Maybe you could point us to a place where a house could go for 1,000 shillings, and that would be able to keep you going throughout for a whole month, just proper shelter. I doubt if that's possible. Now here is where you find the big assumptions. Like, you see, all this food, clothing, housing, other goods and services are just assuming that they're there. Like, you have no extra costs when you're trying to purchase a house or you're trying to purchase clothes and food and beverages. But the thing is, all other goods are 34.4%. All other goods here we said are probably fuel, maybe your water, electricity bills, and all other services are 11.8%, which we mentioned your internet subscription, maybe your insurance, the cost of education. You see here, already we are making the assumption that everybody is consuming public education, and there's no demand for private consumption of education. So if you're telling me that 11.8% would cater for everything from 11.8% of 17,000, which is 2,000 shillings, would cater for school fees, would cater for your insurance, your health costs in the event you get sick and maybe you need to spend much more than you had expected. 2,000 shillings by all means is not sufficient, even in a rural setup. So we now go on to look at, so what are the implications of direct redistribution of income? And we've mentioned that the 44%, about 45% that goes towards food and beverages, yes, it might look very, very sufficient if you weigh it against the food poverty lines, but it would not be sufficient for us to overcome overall poverty, which leads to our first conclusion that direct redistribution might transcend food poverty, but not overall poverty. And this brings us to our next conclusion, because yes, the poverty line is set at about 6,000 Kenya shillings in an urban setup, but you know there are people who earn very well above 6,000 Kenya shillings, in the hundreds of thousands, in the millions, and this direct redistribution of income would not be a Pareto efficient way of allocation of resources. And Pareto efficiency in economics is a state in which by any allocation you make, you are not making anyone worse off. So in this case, I'll move to the next slide and show you how incomes are distributed in Kenya. So this is a distribution of monthly income based on 2019 data. And you can see there are people who earn from 0 Kenya shillings all the way to well above 100,000 Kenya shillings. And this is a bell curve, but you can see the higher proportion of people are earning between about 20,000 Kenya shillings and 49,000 Kenya shillings. Now, this redistribution, we are estimating that everybody would receive an allocation of 17,665 shillings. That's somewhere smack in the middle of the third bar, the bar that indicates between 15,000 and 19,000 Kenya shillings. So the only people who would really be benefiting from this direct redistribution of income are the people who lie on the left of that third bar. And then the people who would be, sorry, can you hear me?
Go ahead, can hear you.
Okay. Sorry.
Yes, we can hear you.
All right. So I was saying that the people who would be made better off by account of redistributing income of 17,665 are those who lie on the left of the third bar, where we're assuming the 17,000 lies somewhere here in the middle between 15 and 19,000 Kenya shillings. But now can you see all these people on the right? People between 20 and 24,000 Kenya shillings, 25 and 29,000, 30, 49,000, which is the hugest bar, 50,000 and 99,000, and even those above 100,000. All those people would be pushed down to that middle bar of 17,000 Kenya shillings. So ideally, in the event of a direct redistribution of income, we'd have just one big bar with all Kenyans fitting on an income group of 17,665 shillings. And that, my friends, that's what we call Peritoneum Efficiency. And it's bad because it also creates perverse incentives. So for those who are made better off, they're like, hey, I can still make more than I deserve or more than I work for without really like putting in the extra effort. So I can just chill and not make any contribution towards the growth of say my business and in general just our GDP. And also for those who have been made worse off, it's like, why am I working so hard? Say someone, like I'm assuming people here who have joined this webinar, you know, you're hardworking Kenyans and you're working so hard for your paycheck, which is maybe, I don't know, 80,000 Kenya shillings and above. and then it's all split down and you get 17,000 Kenya shillings. Why would you work so hard? It's okay. You say, let me go to Rudi Mashinani. And like we saw in earlier slides, overall poverty is actually a worse case in rural Kenya. We have more people living in poverty in rural Kenya than in urban areas. And I don't think the situation would be better if people decide to go back to rural Kenya, but clearly it creates a Pareto inefficient distribution of allocation of resources and perverse incentives. And then also 17,000 Kenya shillings, we remember we calculated that from just directly dividing the gross national disposable income by the population, and that's how you got 17,000 Kenya shillings per month. But it's only a function of how much gross national disposable income we have. So the only way we can get to spend more than the 17,000 Kenya shillings is if we have more national disposable income. And on this slide, we're talking about Kenya's income level not being sufficient to facilitate a direct income redistribution. And for that, we use a production possibility frontier to just illustrate how this situation would be different. So this curve right here shows you a combination of resources, in this case, the pie chart we had for food and beverages, clothing, housing, all other goods, and all other services. So on any point on this line, you're using the maximum allocation you have, which is the 17,000 Kenya shillings. Anywhere below that line, you're using less than the 17,665 shillings. So we've clearly demystified that it's not sufficient to survive on 17,665 shillings. And the only way we can get beyond that 17,000 is if we push this curve, the frontier, the production possibility frontier outwards. And the only way that is possible is if we increase our income. So if we increase our income to above 17,000, which would mean we increase our total gross national disposable income above 10 trillion Kenya shillings, then people would be better off. But for now, you see, we can barely save. If you spend within the curve, you're spending less than 17,000 on all these other needs, and you're trying to save, your savings are very limited. If we push out this curve, people have more to spend and even more to save, and people would be better off. But in conclusion, we've refuted this fallacy empirically. We've shown you 17,000 shillings would not be enough. Logically, we've gone through each and every item on average that households spend, their income, and we've seen that it would really not end poverty because you'd be displacing some people. Yes, food poverty would get people above the food poverty line, but other people would now be moving closer and closer to the poverty line, which is making other people worse off. So we conclude by saying that direct redistribution of income would not end poverty in Kenya. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Maureen Baraza and Anna Grace, for taking us through or trying to break down this common economic statement about it's always mentioned every so often that as a way of addressing poverty, that one of the things that can be done is to redistribute redistribute income equally amongst the citizen. And so what both Maureen and Anna Grace have shown us, by taking us through the issue, they've tried to dissect the entire issue and the reasoning to basically refute this statement, and based on economic, based on some statistics and empirically, what they show is that indeed redistributing income would not end poverty. And so they did this by basically taking us through a definition of what poverty is in terms of the measurement that is used to define poverty line, and then a breakdown of the distribution of typical household expenditure. And then based on that, if our gross national disposable income of 10 trillion is divided equally amongst the 47.5 million Kenyans, of course, the monthly income per capita comes to about 17,665. And then if you break this down by the different components of our household expenditure, which is food and beverage, which takes the largest chunk of our household expenditure, 45%, then you have clothing, etc. What this does, the distribution will only help in terms of transcending food poverty, but not overall poverty. Food poverty, I think, is about 25-50. So they've tried to explain the reasoning, and obviously the fact that if indeed income was to be distributed equally, it would create a perverse incentive. I mean, you would have joyriders. People would not want to work hard, and the like. And obviously, this would be an inefficient way of addressing this issue. And of course, they've concluded, based on this empirical, based on the evidence and the statistics that they've taken us through, that indeed redistributing income equally would not end poverty. So thanks a lot again to Anna, Grace, and Maureen. So I've tried basically to summarize their presentation, and so I would like now to open this up for any questions, any comments that our participants may have. You can do this. You can raise your question or comment, make your comment by either raising your hand. We have that icon there, or you can share whatever questions that you may have in the chat box. So karibuni to our participants. Who would like to go first? I don't see any comment in the chat box. In case you may have any question, for instance, for something that was not clear and you need further clarification, yeah, please feel free to raise your hand or make a comment in the chat box. Anyone?
Hi, John. I'm raising my hand.
Okay, Stephen, please introduce yourself and go ahead.
So my name is Stephen.
Yes.
Stephen Karingi, and sorry I joined when the webinar had started, and I have to also go somewhere. But I found the point at which I joined. I found the presentation quite useful. I think I have nothing to argue against the way the two authors have actually made their case. But I was going to say that I mean, from the literature, and there is a wide range of literature, and I think you have hinted to that, John. It is clear that if you want to deal with poverty, there are two things that you do. And I think one of them was shown in the conclusion, that in order to increase the 17,000 that can go to every Kenyan, you need to grow that pie. So one of the things that you need to do to reduce poverty is basically to increase growth. And there is an elasticity that goes in terms of poverty reduction and the rate of economic growth. The next thing that we know is that inequality does actually have a negative relationship with poverty. So if inequality rises in a country, then it becomes very difficult for you to deal with poverty. So I'm not sure whether, in terms of the policy implication, there is an issue that Maureen and Anna Grace are saying, that we should not be too much bothered about income inequality, because even if we were to share this, we would not be able to deal with the poverty rate. On the contrary, what we need to do, at least from the empirical evidence that is out there, not just for Kenya but across the world, is that one, you need to raise the rate of economic growth, have quality growth, and then two, have policy measures that deal with the whole issue of inequality. So that's the point I wanted to raise, so that at least we get what is the policy message that we are sending out of this analysis. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Stephen, for those comments and for your insights. Any other? So I'd like us to have like a first round of any questions or comments, and then we'll. For that first round, of course, I will allow both Maureen and Anna to respond to those questions, and then we'll have another round, another final round here. I don't see any other. Maureen and Anna, would you like to make any comment? And also maybe Kwame, if you have any comments or reactions to what Stephen has shared, you can also chip in as we, because I don't see any other question. I believe our participants are still warming up to this. Maybe Anna, or yes, please go ahead.
So thank you, Stephen, for the comment. Yes, for sure, increasing incomes would translate to economic growth and poverty reduction as a result. We're not saying that we're disregarding income inequality and its relationship to poverty. It's very obvious, and even as you said, in literature it states that there's a correlation between the two. We just wanted to make it clear that poverty and inequality are two very different things. So like when we were collecting these fallacies to figure out what should we educate Kenyans on, you would hear people say that, you know, in Nairobi, someone is earning 1 million Kenya shillings, and then there's someone here earning 4,000 Kenya shillings at the end of the month. That's inequality, and you can't measure poverty by the difference between the highest income earner and the lowest income earner. So that's why our argument was mainly based on this is the poverty line. Anyone below that is poor, not disregarding the income inequality that exists, but just making the point on measurement of poverty much stronger. Therefore, we can now say that if you do distribute income, yes, we'd be leading to more inequality, but at the same time, we wouldn't really be overcoming poverty. Because even, sorry, maybe we didn't make this clear, but in the presentation, we speak about income redistribution. But you remember how we had that bell curve of the distribution of incomes per month? There are people who would be brought towards the zero side. You see, the ones who are lying on the positive side of 17,000 Kenya shillings. So as much as we are distributing income for those who are below 17,000 shillings, we're also distributing and I say this very lightly, quote unquote, poverty, because we are making some people poorer than they were just to make a smaller proportion of people a bit more better off. Not richer, but above the poverty line. So just to second you, yes, there's a relationship between inequality and poverty, but the measurement is very different. They're not synonymous, and they speak of two different things. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Anna. I think there was a second part of, as we wait to see whether there's anyone else who has a question. There was a second part, Anna, on, I think that Stephen asked what policy message it is that we are driving, or what's basically the objective of this. Maybe you could also respond to that.
Okay, so as John mentioned, this is just but one of 52 fallacies the IEA is going to push out within the year. And the goal of us publishing these 52 fallacies was just to correct people's reasonings. And maybe by extension, we'd be able to inform on policy, but the main objective is to make people realize that these myths you have about redistributing income, or I don't know, something like the previous fallacy we did, it was on demonetization, ending black money. They're not really, I wouldn't say we are pushing for this as a policy paper, but this forum is like the first, it's meeting our first objective, which is to educate people. And I would say, you know, when we speak of income redistribution, at the moment, yes, we do have cash transfers, which is not necessarily taking from the rich and giving to the poor, but it's also a form of distributing income to people who are lacking. You see, it is there, it's working. We're just trying to say that this extreme idea of slashing everyone's income and putting us all in the same bracket, that is not viable, it's not possible. Okay, it is possible, but it would not be successful, at least in the long run. Our policy agenda here is to educate people, which we have done, and to say that maybe there are other ways of redistributing income. Maybe if we target our cash transfers better to elevate the poverty position in Kenya, but not to completely go extreme and give everyone 17,000 shillings. Yeah. I hope that's sufficient, Stephen.
No. I think I just and I think I would have wanted to hear actually Kwame's point on this. So I see the objective of this webinar is basically, first of all, to let everybody know that if we divided our national income, it's actually going to even to have a very bad implications in terms of the disincentives that you talked about. But my concern was that I felt that this kind of static analysis and static view of this question is going to distract from the key policy objective that I think is critical today of dealing with inequalities. I think Kenya is not in an island. We see that inequality has actually been exposed to be one of the biggest issues under this pandemic situation. And so to listen to a presentation that sort of seemed not to indicate that we have to have urgent actions against inequality, which I think is also even driving the climate change issue that we are having now. I thought that was a bit of a strong statement to make. But I think now I understand that what you're trying to do is, first of all, to simplify the major question of some people are too rich, others have little income, so let's divide, which I think, of course, is something that needs to be explained quite well, and I think that's what you have tried to do. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Stephen. I see Kwame's hand up. I think, yeah, Kwame, if you'd like to weigh in, please go ahead.
Yes, thank you very much. It's nice to see you, Dr. Karingi. Yes, so I think the first thing is, as we said, just for everybody's benefit, maybe we are flogging it too much. The way this idea came to us is because we sometimes receive, especially from students, just questions through our general email, asking us to explain one thing or the other. And the second thing is that this also came from looking at the newspapers every day and just generally the literature that describes economic policy and public affairs. We see sometimes a lot of errors in reasoning. And so the function of this is basically because part of the IEA's work is just to expand people's knowledge about how an economy works. But one of the more popular things is, and this is my own judgment, is as you go towards, I visit schools and universities, colleges quite a bit, and one of the things you see is it's true that, as Dr. Karingi mentioned, inequality is a problem, and Kenya has one that is very, very stark. But sometimes people think that the solution should be very immediate, based on the fact that you can solve it tomorrow by simply saying, you hear it quite a lot even with members of parliament. People say that, why should a member of parliament earn X 100,000 shillings or this amount? That money should just be taken and redistributed to other people and Kenyans will be okay. And it's demonstrated to us two things. I think if people don't understand the depth of poverty and how it's measured, then we can trivialize policy choices, as Dr. Karingi has mentioned, by simply saying that, look, if we simply equated the money which comes in from gross national income and gave everybody a check, that would solve it. So our intention first was just to tell people that when you go to the math, first, Kenya's level of overall gross national income, that's available to everybody, even if you distributed it, would not create much change, even if it was possible to actually get the political clout to do that. So that's the first one. And yes, I think we need to re-emphasize that, but it's very, very clear why the reason we drew what economists call the production possibilities frontier is to say that if you are producing 17,000 shillings per person per month, you already have a deep constraint upon whichever way you use that money, you're going to whatever. So maybe we didn't emphasize enough that actually part of the poverty problem is it's a problem of inadequate growth. And then the second one is basically that there is space for very informed policy, an analysis that can tell you that, yes, you can achieve both growth to expand resources available, but also very redistribution is also possible and must happen obviously for stability, but also economists have managed, I've studied this and know that there are forms of growth that actually also allow for inequality to be reduced. So yes, we were not trying to say that it's one or the other, but we wanted to let everybody know that the first thing is part of managing Kenya's poverty problem is definitely ensuring that growth takes place. Growth is just paramount, especially for a country at Kenya's level. So you're right that that communication needs to be emphasized so that we don't mix people up, because our intention first was to inform them, so we shouldn't mix people up to say that nothing should be done. But maybe what we can add is actually that there are more efficient forms of redistribution of income than others. And maybe those inefficient forms can actually also be targeted. And obviously, because poverty in parts of this country are not necessarily caused of the same thing. So finding those reasons and finding an efficient way to redistribute is imperative actually for a student of economics. Obviously, efficiency is essential because we know that resources are scarce. So I hope that's what our intention was. But the clarity that we wanted to provide was to simply ask people that if you say that you're a planner, as basic courses in economics tell you that if you're a planner and a benevolent planner, and these are the resources that are available for you, so what's the allocation function that you would adopt? And this is a very crude one, which is to simply say that, okay, we will put all the money in a pot and then redistribute it back to everybody and ask them to use it as they so. So what we tried to map was to ask ourselves, if you look at the pattern of household expenditure for the years that we have, the 2019, the average Kenyans were spending 44% of all their income on food. Obviously, there are poorer people actually sometimes spend as much as 60 because of that. So we say that if you take the very basic requirements for people to be alive, the 22,200 kilocalories per day, how much would it cost? Which is data that's available from the National Bureau of Statistics. So it was just a thought experiment, certainly static, but our view is that when you do one of the causes of the fallacy that we hear quite a lot and it appears in many newspapers quite often. Sometimes even politicians actually use it against an administration, right? They simply, when they are political rivals, they use it against the others. But we think it's also a very simplistic argument, but we can actually place and show people that part of the problem in Kenya is a scarcity of resources, but also because growth in itself is very low. So obviously, enhancing growth is important as you do the redistribution over time. So it's not as if one or the other is an alternative, but just direct distribution, given Kenya's income level, obviously would not. In fact, a calculation, back of the envelope calculation that I just made as you asked that question, was that the size of the economy would have to be about 3.5 times what it is today, and the population remains static for everybody to be brought above that poverty or whatever. So basically that's the limit. Growth obviously has to be much, much faster, and obviously assume a population that is static. Of course it doesn't, but all it's telling is how much growth has to happen much higher, above population growth rates for poverty to be completely extinguished. And so that's calculating backward.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Yeah, so calculating backward, that's the essence. But I think we'll emphasize that because it's important. But the function of this is just a handbook that people can use to very quickly understand what kind of logic and reasoning do economists have. How is poverty even measured? Because one of the things we found out is when people talk about poverty, it's often not clear to many people. They describe it socially by what people don't have, but it's never clear to many people that economists measure poverty in very precise ways. Very, very precise ways and ways that are informed by data empirically. So that was one of the things we sought to do, and thanks for your question. Thanks, John.
Thank you very much, Kwame.
Yeah, thanks, Kwame, for elaborating further and making that point clear in terms of the motivation behind this and the kind of message that we are trying to convey. So again, checking through I don't see any question in the chat box. So I'd like to invite our participants. If you have any query, please feel free to put up your hand. Okay. Anna and Maureen, in case there's anything that you may have left out that you think you may want to share now. You don't seem to have any further question from the... In case you have any pointer that point that you'd like to share.
Hi, John. There's a question in the chat box.
Yes.
So maybe ask Maureen and Anna Grace to look at it and see if they can answer it.
Okay, yeah. So I've seen, yeah, I see. So there's a question from Richard. So basically, what Richard is asking is what is the relationship of the fallacy with bottom-up model? I don't know which bottom-up model Richard is referring to. Richard, are you in the? Are you in the? Richard, would you like to explain your question further? Yes, please go ahead. Which bottom-up model are you referring?
Yeah, this is on the context of the current national debate on this economic model of bottom-up approach to issues of economics. I wanted to see if there is any perceived relationship between the fallacy and this so-called approach or model that is a national debate right now. That is the model I'm referring to. The current ongoing debate on bottom-up economic model that politicians are now propping it up. Yes.
Yeah. Thank you. I did not want to assume anything. Thanks for that explanation. Anna Grace or Maureen? Or even Kwame, if you like to.
Okay, thank you, John. In this fallacy, we were trying to look at if we distribute the income directly to the people, but for the case of the bottom-up economy, for the sake of bottom-up economy, we are not sure what the problem the bottom-up model is really trying to solve in this case. So I don't see a direct correlation between the two. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Maureen. Anna, you want to add something? Yeah, go ahead.
So, from what I've been hearing about the bottom-up model, is it's almost like trying to achieve structural transformation, getting people from lower productive sectors to higher productive sectors. That's from agriculture, pushing up to manufacturing and services. But how that's related with the fallacy of redistributing income, well, yes, it would be improving the incomes of like the really low income earners, but then now creating another problem where even those who are doing much better in those higher productive sectors are now pulled down to a much lower level of productivity. So it's like counterintuitive if we try to look at it from the bottom-up model. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks, Maureen and Anna for that. Any other question? Yeah, I guess also for Richard's sake, hopefully once we get to access these different models or manifestos that have been suggested by these different candidates who gunning for presidency. I believe as I hear, like we've done in the past, we will review them and do some discussions around them, just to not only educate the public, but also try to critique them, at least from an economic perspective. Okay, so I don't seem to see any, and this is the last final chance for or opportunity for any final questions before I invite Maureen and Anna to make their final remarks, and then of course for Kwame to make the concluding remarks, because I see, yeah, on this. So final opportunity for any final query. Going 1, 2, 3. Okay. Yes, Benjamin. Please go ahead. Atika. Benjamin, can you hear me? I see Benjamin's hand raised, Benjamin Atika, but Benjamin, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Okay, please go. Yeah. Please go ahead, introduce yourself, and then you can pose your question.
My name is Benjamin Atika, and I was looking at the disincentives which you had listed, indicating the issue that it reduces the urge of, for example, the business people to undertake business. Because when I was engaging with some few businessmen a few days ago, they told me that as they wait for, in relation to the bottom-up economy, that they were waiting for government to provide for them money. So for now, they won't be undertaking any heavy business investment or seeking loans. So I was just thinking, even the discussion itself on income distribution, it already affects the people currently without having to wait for income distribution in itself to be done, even though we don't have a clear picture of what is being done or how it will be redistributed. But according to the understanding of the business people was that the money, there was some money, I don't know, there's some money government is going to be giving everybody. So we can already see that as an disincentive will reduce the opportunities for growth, as business people are more reluctant to undertake take credit in the hope that they will get free money in the future. That was my observation.
I'm on mute. Sorry, yeah, thanks, Benjamin, for that question. I hope it was clear to both Maureen and Hannah. So there have been no other question. I would like to invite Anna, you can go first. Any response to what Benjamin has mentioned, and then you make your final remarks. Then Maureen, you can follow, and then Kwame, you can make your final concluding remarks after that.
Thank you, John. Benjamin, thank you for that. I didn't get whether it was a question or a comment. I felt like you were reinforcing the idea of the perverse incentives for business owners. And sorry, there's another question in the chat box. Yeah, so to re-emphasize what Benjamin just mentioned about the perverse incentives, of course, if there's free money, you wouldn't hesitate to take it, but that would also reduce, or rather it would act as a disincentive for people who actually were working and making more money and now are taking home less. So yes, it does. The direct cash transfer, the direct redistribution of income would create disincentives for people to improve their productivity. And as I conclude, I'd like to thank you all for joining us today. We've taken our notes on like how we should better frame our arguments. Yes, as much as we are trying to refute the fallacies, we should also bring in solutions, or rather, like what should be the way forward in terms of policy implementation to address the economic issue raised within the fallacy. Thank you.
Thanks, Anna. Maureen?
Okay, thank you, John. Okay, for Benjamin's comment on the case of the businessman, not taking credit for because they'll receive free money, that will also be one of the perverse disincentives, like Anna mentioned. Yeah, and yeah, the comments on how we can factor in other modes of redistributing income to end poverty. Yeah, we'll also factor that in. And yeah, looking at our presentation today on redistributing direct redistribution of income in Kenya to end poverty, we've been trying to refute that, and yeah, from the math and the reasoning that we've given and looking at the poverty thresholds, we've seen that it's not a viable option, and yeah, it will only help it will only be viable maybe in the food poverty, and yeah, it's operationally inefficient, and yeah, we'll factor in all the other comments that you've been given by Stephen and the rest. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Maureen. And so to Kwame, your concluding remarks.
All right. Thanks, everyone. So let's remember that the function, what you are trying to do today is basically going through the popular press or listening to conversations and identifying some reasoning that is not correct, whether it's just because of the math, the economics reasoning that is incorrect, and our intention is actually just to create to expand public understanding about how economies work. So what my two colleagues have done is just basically to simulate a static simulation, which is basically to ask ourselves, we hear a lot that, look, income redistribution, and by this we mean direct redistribution. There are many ways in which government redistributes money, but I talked about direct redistribution, assuming no transaction costs. It would mean that every Kenyan would have about 17,000 shillings per month. So if you redistributed that, would you get rid of poverty? The conclusion is that yes, it is possible to get rid of food poverty, but not of poverty in general, partly because it's clear that the resource envelope is actually very small. So the two lessons that we draw from this fast is basically that today, I think the main constraint is not just the policy desire to distribute, even if that existed. The main constraint is actually the resource envelope is small, meaning that the place of growth in affecting poverty reduction, or at least reducing the level of poverty and the suffering that occurs under it, is imperative. So growth is not something to argue with. The second point is that there's a possibility, and economists know analysis that show that there are more efficient ways, some forms of growth that actually help to bring in people with low resources so that they can find jobs, they can work, and obviously by doing that job, you increase their labor. I mean, finding opportunities for employment, you increase their labor. So that's, I think, another lesson that we need and we can emphasize. But as I stated, the function here was simply to say that simplistic views about economic policy, about simply taking property and redistributing it about taking income and redistributing it to everybody else, given Kenya's development level, would not do much for poverty. In addition to the fact that, of course, it would have other adverse consequences. So that's the function of this. Now, this presentation will be available for circulation, obviously. So if you're interested in it, please just send us an email and we can send it out to you. But otherwise, thanks for attending our meeting. And thank you too for some of the feedback that we received, especially from Dr. Karingi. Yes, we've had to clarify our thought about making sure that the communication is clear about what question we are answering and the options, for the policy options specifically, which we were not targeting, but what it means, because that comes as a natural question, then the so what. So we need to consider the so what of these fallacies that we are trying to debunk. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Kwame, for that. I think it's now very clear what the intention of this webinar was, largely public education, basically on what are fallacies, and of course we chose this one on redistributing income, and just basically made some arguments and reasoning why it will not end poverty. Of course, we've received certain, based on the comment and the discussion, there are certain other related issues which were not necessarily the focus of this, but obviously they are useful in terms of helping us ensure that whatever, I mean, the way we craft this, the fallacies, we try to ensure that they are clear in responding to some of the issues that have been mentioned, and also try to provide examples as much as possible. So thanks a lot for your participation and for taking time this morning to join us in this webinar. Of course, we'll be having more of this as we go forward in building up or creating a buzz towards the launch of the 52 economic fallacies. So please look out for this in our social media pages and on our website. I would also like to welcome you again tomorrow for we'll be having another webinar. I think the same time tomorrow from 10 to 12. And it's related to, I need to get there. It's basically an index for measuring I'll post it here. Yeah, so I think the discussion will be about looking at the, it's an assessment or a tool that has been used to measure the size and the depth of financial markets in Africa. So you're invited for this tomorrow from 10 to about for about 2 hours, and we'll be sharing the link for this webinar tomorrow. Then yeah, so it's actually on it's African Financial Market Index. So please look out for that tomorrow. And then just to conclude, it's been posted actually. Both Kwame and Michelle have posted the title, and of course the focus will be on Kenya vis-a-vis its peers from East Africa community. So yeah, so please look out for that. Then finally, the Institute of Economic Affairs is a membership organization, and if you like to join us or to be a member of the IEA, feel free to go to our website. You can download the form, and there are obviously many benefits of being a member, including just basically getting firsthand the different research products that we generate, and also